Now let's talk about document organization. Design layers and classes are primarily used for organization as well as visibility control. As far as the differences between a class and a layer, classes are used for the what and layers are used for the where. For example, you can think of a design layer as the floor of a building, where everything that's on that floor is on that particular design layer. And classes are used for objects that may be on that particular floor, such as doors, windows, furniture, and so on. So let's go over classes. All documents have two classes by default, the none class and the dimension class. The none class is the default class. As I said, it's in every file. You will want to use the none class where you don't need specific control, whether it be visibility or attribute settings, through a specified class. You really never want to turn this class off. This should always be on, as a lot of standard objects in the software will use this class for their base components. Some objects are auto-classed. Specifically, the most common one is a dimension. As I mentioned before, there's always a dimension class. Any dimension you create will automatically go into this class. There is always an active class in the file. You can change this in the view bar, and this will control the class that objects are placed in when you create them. If you want to change the class of an object after it's already been created, you simply select it, go to the Object Info palette, and choose the class from the Class pop-up menu. To view all of your classes, you go to the Tools menu and then choose Organization, and this will bring up the Organization dialog. In Design Series version of the software, you also have a palette called the Navigation palette, which is essentially a miniature version of the Organization dialog. Here you can add new classes. Just click the New button at the bottom, give it a name. You can also set attributes by class. Here you can see we can set a fill, pen, opacity, and various other attributes. If you want objects to use class attribute settings, in addition to setting up the class attribute settings here, you also have to make sure the object is set to use class attributes. This is done in the Attributes palette. You just set the desired attribute to class style. Now let's talk about design layers. Normally when we say layers, we're generally referring to design layers. There are also sheet layers. Sheet layers are created for the presentation of the finalized project. These will be covered in more detail in other Getting Started guides. Just like with objects and classes, all objects are placed on a design layer. They will be placed on the active design layer by default, and can be changed or moved to a different layer in the same way as classes by simply selecting the object and going to the Object Info palette and choosing a new layer from the layer pop-up. You can also edit and create new design layers through the Organization dialog under the Tools menu. Design layers have various settings such as scale, elevation, opacity settings, and so on. These will be covered in more detail in other guides as well. So now let's go into stacking order. There are two types of stacking order. First is object, and the second is design layer. We'll start with object stacking. Objects have a stacking order on a particular design layer. The first object created is at the back or bottom, and the most recent object is in the front or on top. There are send commands to send objects forward or backward. The send to front and send to back commands will send objects all the way to the front or all the way to the back on their design layer. The stacking order applies to all 2D and 3D objects when viewing objects in a top plan view. However, if you switch to any other view, so if any 3D view, objects will appear where they are in 3D space and will disregard stacking order. This is specifically 3D objects. 2D objects still will maintain their stacking order. So let's go into design layer stacking now. Design layers are stacked like sheets of paper or vellum. The first layer is on top. If you have objects on different layers, the object on the topmost stacked layer will always be on top of the other objects. As you can see, even if we send this object to front, it is still stacked below the object on the higher stacked layer. So now let's go into visibilities. You can use both classes and design layers to control the visibility of objects. If we go back into the organization dialog, you can see there are 3 visibility settings. There's visible, gray, and invisible. These settings apply for both classes and design layers. Here we've got a basic floor plan. There are 2 floors and that are on 2 separate layers, and there's a few objects in different classes. First, I'm going to set the second floor to gray, and as you can see, the entire second floor, all objects on the second floor of this building now show as gray. I can also completely turn them off by just changing the setting to invisible. Now, if you see, all the furniture on the first floor is in the furniture class, and I'm going to set this to invisible. This turns all the furniture off on that particular class. In addition to individual visibility control for a design layer or a class, there is also overall class and layer options. These include active only, which allows you to only see and modify objects that are in the active class or on the active design layer. We have gray others. This option still shows objects in other visible classes or other visible design layers, but they are grayed. However, you can still modify objects in the active class and on the active design layer. The next option is gray snap others. This is similar to gray others, except you'll also be able to snap to those gray objects. Next is show others. This option will allow you to see all objects in visible classes or on visible design layers, but you can only modify objects in the active class or design layer. And then we have show snap others, very similar to gray snap others and show snap others. Essentially, you'll be able to see all objects and snap to all objects, but you can only interact or modify objects in the active class or on the active design layer. Next is show snap modify others. This mode will allow you to see all objects in visible classes or on visible design layers, and you can also modify and interact with all of those objects as well. The typical settings, by default, classes are normally set to show snap modify others, and design layers are set to gray snap others. You would change these settings to quickly limit what you can see or modify to make things easier to work with. Normally, you will want to keep your layer options set to a mode that only allows you to modify objects on the active design layer. This helps you isolate the objects you're working on. Class options should normally be set to show snap modify others. It's common to work with objects that are in multiple classes at the same time. Also, there are container objects in Vectorworks that have sub-objects that can be in multiple classes. We'll go into these type of objects in the next video, but using show snap modify others is really the only way to see and interact with these type of objects. A final tip I want to mention is that if you ever find that you cannot select or interact with an object and you're not sure why, it's almost always a class or layer option setting. The easiest way to fix this is if you actually right-click or do a secondary click on the object. There is an option called Force Select. This will change whatever settings are necessary to make that object selectable. Normally it'll change your active class or active design layer. Coming up next, we're going to go over the different object types.